so much of what it is that we need to do is based on the land and the earth and nature itself. I always wondered, why could we not design the land, specifically in the cities, so that it had kind of a cultural part of it, that it actually resonated with culture, just like architecture does. We have debates, you look at these, it's about not just the land, but how we perceive the land. Why is it that everybody thinks that a landscape has to be a copy of nature? And that is why people think that this is what landscape should be. It should, even if it's on top of a garage or on top of a building, or, it has to mimic nature. I believe that it has to function as nature, but it doesn't necessarily have to look like nature. And that's kind of how I look at this. I think that landscape architects are able to understand what is happening in climate change very clearly, kind of what the effects are on specifically on cities, and to create environmental benefits for people. I mean, like oxygen, like water, like food, that kind of stuff that people need. The land can do that. Buildings can't do that. And that we're going to need more and more space in our cities, because cities are going to get hotter and hotter, and urban heat island effect for all these cities. So what are we going to do with all the influx of people? What are we going to do to feed them? The idea that we're going to be going the way we have been going isn't really reality. By 2050, countries are not going to be sharing food. So how do we make our food? Even in New York, we had a bad crop last year because there was too much rain and the seeds couldn't get up. And the UK is going to be food scarce. You are now. You have to import it. But countries are going to have to make sure that they're able to provide for their own populations. So where are you going to get that food? You kind of need the landscape to do that, right? And then what do you do about all the floods and too much water? We already have that in the Northeast, because it's now rainy and cloudy all the time. It's like London. It's like, oh my God, this is like London. What do we do with that? New York floods a lot, and the infrastructure is super old. What are we going to do? They don't have the money to actually redo all the infrastructure. So what are we going to do? The key is that if we open up the land, we can take care of that. If we're just going to keep on paving and making it impervious, it just means that we're just going to flood and continue flooding. So we're going to have to really go back and figure out how to use the landscape itself for creating food, for dealing with floods, for dealing with heat island effect, and to provide food, to cool, there are so many benefits of the land itself, but nobody actually thinks about the land underneath the cities. It doesn't exist anywhere. There's no topic about it. Even in the Ipcc, where they really measure land, there is a land part of the Ipcc where they measure the benefits of land. And there's, of course, the forests, there's the agriculture, coastal areas, but the land that cities sit upon are never acknowledged as anything. I believe that the professionals within the built environment have to change, and the hierarchy of the professional environment has to change. And the idea that architects are the master builders and we are decorators, it's so important that changes. Because it's not like you do something, then, we put the parsley around the pig. Our view of how we build cities have to be completely changed. We have to work together, because the issues are so large and complex that being the master architect is not going to help. And this idea about green buildings with the trees on them and all this kind of stuff, and we're going to save the world, and it's like a 19th, 20th century thinking about just building buildings. And we have to really figure out how to integrate technology as well as environmental benefits in the land. this thing, and planning. Planning is probably the most important piece of this, because we're going to have to figure out how to create more open land in cities. So we have to have a change in terms of where landscape architecture sits, which is just kind of like kind of going and getting your hair done or something. And architects need to be working with a broader range of people. Actually, the urban planners really need to kind of have, a group of people who are well educated about climate change, what's going to be happening, and how we actually deal with it. It has to be done as a group. It's really about how we're going to protect ourselves in the future. What are our children what is it going to be like for their children? This is a very long-term, more difficult, complex issue, actually, even in COVID. And there needs to be a forum of people coming from different angles and different professions, especially bringing in scientists who are able to think about the future. We can't be designing like we designed in the past. We have to imagine and know enough to be able to project what we think is going to happen in the future, because climate change isn't just like the way it is now. It's going to evolve. It's climate change. It's not like going to get to a point and then it just stops. This is going to be an evolution feedback that just continues to spiral and spiral and spiral. And then, of course, most people don't really understand much of it. We go to the Ipcc, right, for information. Well, the Ipcc only tells you a little bit of what's happening. Most people, it's very focused on emissions. And we think that if we take down emissions, we will have solved climate change. That is not what's going to happen. For many, many reasons, scientific reasons, the Earth is going to continue to warm up for decades. So there is no way of stopping at 1.5 or 2 degrees. That's not going to happen. Global warming is going to be spiraling up. Are we talking about that? Are we doing anything about it? We're not, because we are, while we're very focused on emissions, we have carbon credits. Large companies are actually doing that, but actually not really accomplishing anything. And there's no real support for adaptation. And that's what actually we need, because what happens is that the systems of the Earth are very slow. So whatever we're doing now, perhaps in 50 years or 100 years, the effects will come up. And we have to remember that the ocean absorbs carbon dioxide and heat, and then it puts it back out. And the Earth absorbs heat and it puts it back out. And we need to be thinking about how do we live in a world that continues to heat up. And we worked on a project, I can't say what it is, but a very large project. I like working on large projects where I can actually integrate these big ideas and kind of insert working technologies like direct air capture. And I can actually say, well, we're going to design this industrial project so that it's negative carbon. And that we're going to actually take rock weathering, which is this idea where there are some rocks that take down carbon dioxide. And if you actually kind of make them into like a sand, and by doing that, you create a lot more surface area, and the surface area takes down a lot of carbon dioxide. And so, this I read years ago now, and you can take certain rocks and do this, and some of them are fantastic colors. So I kind of did a land art project with these colorful rocks that also take down carbon dioxide. We were able to come up with ideas about how to be self-sufficient. How does this big industrial project, how does it run by itself? So it's not destroying the land, it's not putting up emissions, and then it's really taking our resources and recycling all of them. That's a very important thing, because if everybody lived like Americans, we would need 4.5 planets. We don't have that much stuff to be able to continue living like we do. So we have the ability to desalinate water and use the salt to store energy. And the water comes from sewage that gets cleaned, so that's very recyclable. And then we make our food. We have indoor agriculture that we grow, and we have the direct air capture machine. So we take the carbon dioxide and pump that into the greenhouses, which creates 4 or 5 different crops. And then we create our own food, and we create our own energy, and we have these virtuous cycles, which means that it's pretty self-sufficient. And it's beautiful. Let's talk about beauty and design. There's no reason why these ideas are not made to be beautiful, because beauty creates sustainability. We react to what we see as beautiful, and actually as human beings, we need that. That it's a fundamental part of our lives. So there's no rule saying, well, if you're going to do something that's performative, you don't have to bother designing it. But of course you do, because it's for us, for humans, and that people will take care of those things. Yeah. But I've started a nonprofit to support solar radiation management, the research, because I know we're going to need it. Absolutely, we're going to need this. We're going to need to cool down the Earth, because there's no way, I think, we're going to be able on time to avoid real catastrophe, because at 2 degrees it's a catastrophe. And the other thing is that we're not supporting adaptation, which is what we need. Your EU has not supported it. We're not sending, the global north is not sending money down to the global south. We're not doing it because you know why? We think technology is going to save us, and it's not. It will help, but we don't know how to make a leaf, and we need organics to live. It's a very simple thing, but we have this focus on technology, which has been fantastic, but we have to regenerate the earth so that we can benefit from what the earth gives us. Without that, technology isn't going to just save the day.
Good. Well, thank you very much.
Peter, you're very welcome. It's lovely to see you.